that really does fit because of the work that we've been doing in my department related to disability and design. If you play with the words a little, this to me also rings very true. Society creates social and environmental barriers which result in disability. So you can see from that framework, disability really is not so much about the person and the condition in which they have. It's much more the way our environments are designed that don't take everybody into account. So let's talk a little bit about framing disability. This is my favorite graphic. But it's to help us all remember that we need to look at disability through a very different lens than we have in the past. If you think about the concept of diversity and all the things that come under diversity, then you think racial diversity, gender equality, think religious diversity, gender identity, age, and so disability really is under that same umbrella, is that aspect of diversity. But what does disability look like? Some of those other graphics in here are what it looks like. This is what disability looks like. It looks like you and me. When I do this presentation to a classroom, I like to kind of look out and see people in the room, 600 people, and I'll tell them to look around. There are about 20% of people who have a disability of some type. And so when you think of disability, it's not an us or them, it's a fun of them. And I think that's a very common mistake in a lot of cases. Because people feel like you belong to either one or two camps. You have a disability or you don't have a disability. But how I frame it is that you are in one or two camps, but you're different paradigms. You either have a disability or you're going to have a disability if you live long enough. So disability really does affect everybody, whether it's personal, yourself, or family, or friends, etc. So why is reframing disability so important? Why is accessibility so important? Well, I think what has happened is that historically, we have looked at disability as a compliance issue. Laws that are placed, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Americans with Disabilities Amendment, etc. So people look at it from here's the law, let's be in compliance with that so that we don't have a complaint filed against us. And that really is an old way of thinking about disability. New thinking really is following the spirit of the law. And Congress's intent with the ADA was to level the playing field. It wasn't to help people know where the line was so that they could discriminate up until that line and not beyond. So really ADA is civil rights legislation. It was modeled after the civil rights legislation in the 1960s. So when you think of it in those terms, how you approach disability looks very, very different. Let's talk about a few of those. This image is to symbolize the past. You know, I'm not down on the ADA at all. I'm very grateful it's passed, and 20 plus years it's been in existence. It has been a tremendous benefit to disabled people all around the country. But it was set in place to solve a problem, and that problem has not yet been solved. And I think part of the reason that problem has not been solved is because, again, people are looking very rigidly and very legalistically at what they have to do according to the law. This image to me represents where we're going as a field. And when I say field, I'm talking specifically about disability and higher education. This really to me symbolizes the future and what we would like to see prosper, and not to be looking back at old legislation that kind of boxes us in, but to look forward and expand our view of what we can do to the environment for students and practice freely and accessible. So typically, in a disability office firm, the very first question that the DS disability services provider asks is, does the student have a disability? That's the question they want to answer. Well, I'm going to posit to you that that is not the important question at all, and the ADA Amendment Act supports it entirely. The question is, what barriers is the student experiencing? That's really our call. That's what we're supposed to be doing in this field, identifying barriers that students are experiencing. So when our focus is there, it really is quite a different approach than the historical approach. When the barriers are identified, then of course our next step is to think about how can we remove those barriers. There are a couple of ways to remove barriers. One is in design, accommodation, which I think most people are very familiar with. Student comes into the DS office and they're not able to access a course or a building or a website. In our office, it's an accommodation so that they need access to learn for their students. But to me, that's a very reactive approach. You know, we're waiting for the problem to show up on our doorstep and then we come up with a solution that we can for those students. The design approach is a much more proactive and sustainable approach. So what that focus is thinking about environments where students are going to interact with them and designing them from the ground up to be accessible so that accommodation is not even necessary. And that really is the focus of our department. And it's all about inclusive design. Our ultimate goal in our department is for students not to experience barriers related to their disability, for them to just access everything just like every other student does just by showing up. And to have this kind of a feel, this image of it being open and welcoming and no barriers. Let me walk you through a couple of examples that kind of get you from the old thinking of accommodations to the new design. This is a ramp that was built after the fact for an older building. I'm not sure where this was taken. But as you can see, it does the zigzag to get access to the building. So maybe we have to enter from the bottom and go up and back and up and back and up to get to the building. This is obviously an afterthought. Somebody put up a building and then later thought, oops, people in wheelchairs need to come into this building. So they built it, and it's perfectly functional. It's not practical, it's not elegant. I wouldn't want it attached to my house. But it does the job. If you look as things evolve, let's look at this building. This is the front of the building on our campus, Dickinson Hall, which is the building I'm in right now. You're probably in. When you approach the front of the building, there are two steps to enter the building. So if you're in a wheelchair or pushing a walker or you're the UPS guy with a whole bunch of packages on a dolly, you're thinking, this isn't going to work for me at all. Well, as you can see over here on the side, there is an accessible entrance. It's separated from the other entrances, but it's still pretty easy to get to. So, and it was designed that way. The building was designed that way. So you don't have the ugly ramp attached to the building. But it's still not exactly right, I would say. I have a friend of mine who uses a wheelchair, and he says what this design does for him is it creates a social barrier. Because if they're approaching that building from the north, and they get to that building, if he's with a group of friends, everybody enters through that way, and he is feel lost in the group and go around to the accessible door and hopefully get back up with him. So he calls that a social barrier, and I think that's a really visceral thing to take experience. That the designers of this building probably didn't want to at all, because they're likely not wheelchair users. So yes, it gives access, but it's not quite there. Consider this building. I'm not sure where this is in other states. As you can see, the front of the building is a bank of glass doors. Over here you've got an accessible door. And the approach as you go up to the building is a very gentle incline, straight up from the side. So with this approach, everybody can access this going in the same way. There's no ugly ramp, there's no kind of a separate location that people in wheelchairs have to go through. So to me, this design really does. It does the universal design. Everybody can access it the same way. It's ready for anybody. If you're a wheelchair user or if you're a mom pushing your child in the stroller, it works for everybody. Let's translate that. Oh, I'm sorry. So this is which one is good design. You know which one I'm going to say. Let's translate that to the web environment. This is a website, City of San Diego. It's a very visually attractive site. It's kind of different from my favorite. It's attractive and it gets the job done. website. They would design the front website for everybody to access to use their vision, and they would design a text-only website for blind users. I looked, the information on here was not exactly the same. It was mostly parallel, not exactly. So for a blind user, if they went on the old site, or the visual site, ideally they would have instructions immediately on their screen reader that would give them a hyperlink to the text-only page. They didn't even have that. I had to Google find that. And I would say it's functional. People could use it, but it still has some problems. People can't access it the same way everybody else accesses it. You get on the San Diego website, and if you're a screen reader user, all you get is junk. It reads just junk back to you. It doesn't even tell you how to get to the site. You've got to really work to find it. The other problem is, like I said, it's not an exact representation of what's on the original site. Because one reason people went away from this model is because when you design your site and then do a text only, you have two jobs to do. You update it on one, and you just go to the text only website. Well, what always happens, I wouldn't say what always happens is somebody forgets to update their text only. And so then that data is not updated, it's not correct. And so the blind user, even if they can find that site, they're not getting the text only. But it also misses the mark, in my mind, as far as other people who might want to fix on the website. For instance, if someone has dyslexia, they want the screen reader to read it to them. But would you want to access this page visually if you're a sighted user who has dyslexia? No, absolutely not. You're going to want this page when you go right through this page because you can get all the visual information plus everybody's speaking. So that to me is the equivalent of the ugly manual site.